As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Aline of Health is dedicated to delivering pro-level care for our Loons. But our partnership goes much deeper than what happens on the field. From our shared support of youth-focused nonprofits like Roots for the Home Team to empowering adaptive athletes through the MNUFC Power Soccer Team, Aline of Health and Minnesota United are committed to making our communities all together better. Learn more at alineofhealth.org/loons. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Sound of the Loons, presented by Aline of Health. And this time, I get to be joined by probably the man of the hour here. After we are recording this on Wednesday, July 31st. Minnesota United just coming off a fantastic victory over Necaxa in a fabulous goalkeeping performance by the starting goalkeeper Dane St. Clair. So I get to be joined by the new man on campus, who's also in charge of goalkeeping, Thomas Fawdry. And I probably already butchered it. I joke about this with Khaled all the time. I'm like, I always screw up your name, even though you just told me how to say it. So how are you? I know you and I were just talking about it, but have you recovered from last night's performance?
Yeah, hi Kyndra. Thank you for having me, first of all. Last night was obviously an incredible occasion. I think first and foremost, fantastic to get a win in trying circumstances. And then obviously it's always nice for the goalkeeper to perform, but the performance that Dane put in was honestly one of the best that I've seen live. Incredible performance, and I think it just shows the strength of his character and mentality to produce a performance like that in trying circumstances.
Well, and we'll dive into all of Minnesota United and your role with the club, but I want to just get a little bit on your background, because I know people, as there have been new signings coming in this season and there's been so much change with this Minnesota United club heading into 2024, then they all of a sudden get, people get another press release, they see it on Twitter, whatever it might be, that you come into the mix. Can you tell people your soccer background, your passion for soccer, your love from soccer, where that came from, and then also your goalkeeping experience and what that looks like, so people can kind of get a feel for you as a person?
Yeah, I think obviously my passion for the game started at a young age, like most people. Exposure to playing the sport. Obviously, football's the main sport in England. Everybody grows up with access to it, playing it, loving it, watching it on TV. Have exposure to one of the best leagues in the world day in, day out. So yeah, started at a really young age, playing at kind of under eights and under nines. Had a journey through kind of playing local football. I had a mixture of trials at professional clubs and academies, and then really just playing my youth career at a local kind of semi-professional level, leading into going into coaching at a really young age, like around kind of 20 years old. I kind of knew that was kind of my passion and my calling. So that's really what I decided to dedicate my time to. And coaching's taken me all over the world, many different environments. So I've been like really fortunate to work in a number of different countries, with a lot of different players, and probably coaching at every level of the game almost. So I think really interesting and diverse. I've lived in New Zealand and Australia. I've worked in the UK, and obviously have been brought to the States really recently.
Well, and I want to ask you though about goalkeeping. Why that? Why that specific aspect of it? Because I know you also have a coaching license in the goalkeeping aspect. Was that where you played? Did you already? I always say, and this is not a negative, but goalkeepers in general have a little bit of a screw loose, because to be able to stand in that kind of pressure, to be in those moments, to withstand that kind of, and I say the same for hockey, which you'll probably learn the more you're in Minnesota, to just be shot on, and then the diving, even the training sessions are so grueling. What was it about goalkeeping that intrigued you? What did you love about that aspect?
I think initially it's like the individuality of the position and how unique it is. So it's almost like a sport within a sport, right? Even though the goalkeeper is integrated into the team, and probably more so today than like any other time in history. But my love of goalkeeping started really young, and I really my introduction into soccer was growing up in goal, playing in goal from a young age. I spent my whole youth career in goal. I'd stopped playing around kind of 19, 20, and then started playing again kind of later in my career in the National League in New Zealand and a little bit in Australia as well. So I think coaching has opened up so many kind of avenues and windows to me. And goalkeeping has always been like a unique and special position. But I grew up watching football. I would watch football obsessively as a kid, and that kind of stood with me throughout my entire life. And even to this day, I watch as much football as I can and as many games as I can. So yeah, like just a real love for the game, love for the position, and the individuality that the position brings as well.
Well, you said you were pretty much always in goal as a youngster. Did you have or do you have siblings? Because I find that a lot. It feels like if there's siblings, sometimes you're the one always stuck in goal, or if you have older siblings or something, it's like, hey, you go on goal, I'm going to shoot on you. Like what? How did that come about that you were always the one? Because also here in the United States, and I'm not sure if it's the same in England, at the young ages, they want you to play everywhere until you sort of hone in and you finally find, two or three players that maybe like goalkeeping more than others and have a knack for it. But was that any aspect of it as a youngster that you had siblings maybe that were like, hey, you get stuck in goal today?
Yeah, no, good question because that is normally the scenario. I've only got an older sister who definitely didn't play football, so think that really started from a young age where I had a local field really close to my house. And from the age of like 8 or 9, we'd just spend all day there playing football. And I think probably being like one of the younger kids was stuck in goal and put in goal. There's probably quite limited outfield at that age as well. So I think that's really where it started. And I would go there, would spend all day playing, I'd spend all day playing in goal. And then I think that kind of proceeded to me like trialing for my local town. I come from a small town in England, so I played for my town for like most of my like youth soccer career. So that's really kind of how it originated.
Did I read somewhere that you coached and then sometimes would fill in as a player when there were injuries? Is that factual information? When I was doing some research in one of your coaching positions, is that a real thing?
Yeah, so that's true. Yeah, so I was playing semi-professionally in England probably until at the age of around 20. And then when I was 27, I went to New Zealand. So I hadn't played competitive football for maybe like 6 or 7 years. And then I started playing again in New Zealand. And I had like a player coaching role in the New Zealand National League at one stage. So yeah, I was playing some games. I come off the bench, I think twice. I played in 4 or 5 games in the league. So it was really interesting to me. But I think having been exposed to coaching and being around the sport and training every single day, like every team I've coached with, I've ended up having to join in training and those type of things when you've been a goalkeeper short. So I think that it keeps you active, and I think coaching almost improves you as a player to an extent. Like I didn't have the time really to focus on playing on myself and was always coaching. But I think as a byproduct of being in the game and being involved in training every single day, I could maintain some sort of level of performance.
Yeah, that player coach role and jumping in and training works a little better when you're still young, like you are. As you get a little bit older and we see some of these other coaches, I'm not sure it would work so well hopping in even in a training session. But when you got the opportunity to go and experience coaching in other countries, what intrigued you about that the most? Maybe what was your favorite stop? And then also in the different levels that you have coached, what have you sort of gleaned? We always talk about you learn along the way and some things that you definitely don't want to do and some things that you're like, oh, I definitely am going to take this and use this. So can you give us a little insight into that?
Yeah, of course. I think initially my approach and journey into coaching really started without any like decisive destination or really any focus in where I would end up. It was just I had a love for the game and I wanted to continue in the game. wasn't quite up to the level to have a career as a player. So I really started like coaching in schools and community coaching, and I think I did my first coaching qualification at 20. And then that led me to go to university, which was really game changing for me. So I studied a degree specifically in football that encompassed kind of every like single area of football as you can imagine, like coaching, psychology, physiology, tactics, analysis, goalkeeping, like everything.
Which, by the way, I don't think that degree exists over here in the United States, but I'm sure there's plenty of people that would sign up for that because when I was reading that in your information, I was like, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was honestly, it was really game changing for me. It was like I felt how to learn for the first time. I wasn't academically great in school, and I really lacked kind of some focus, but that really gave me some drive and determination and a little bit of confidence that I might be able to build some sort of career in the game. So that also allowed me a lot of time as well to rack up a lot of coaching hours. And then it kind of led me into professional academies, which obviously then in turn led me to opportunities overseas. I spent 2 years in New Zealand. I was already working at professional clubs in England. Had the opportunity to go out to New Zealand again through contacts that I'd made through university. Spent 2 years in New Zealand, 4 years in Australia, and then 3 years back in England. So yeah, like really diverse. I worked at community level, school level. I worked for a long time in professional academies. And then for the last 5 years in senior professional football.
So when you were on those journeys, was there a stop that you enjoyed the most? And not maybe it's just the atmosphere, maybe it was where you were living, maybe it was the culture and had nothing to do with the soccer itself. Was there a stop that you really enjoyed or were pleasantly surprised by and you weren't sure that you were going to love it as much as you did?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Like I think I've been really lucky. Some of the destinations I've been exposed to. New Zealand is a beautiful country. It has everything in terms of landscape and everything you can imagine. The footballing culture is a little bit limited in comparison to the UK and the US. However, I think to be in a nation where football is developing and you can contribute quite significantly into the development of players. And I was working across like coach education, working in national teams, working with academy players, working in first team. I was playing, and I really wanted to just like throw myself in. So I think New Zealand was like a real significant point for me. In terms of an actual destination, I think Brisbane in Australia is probably one of the best cities I've lived in terms of the climate, in terms of how, like just again how beautiful the city is. Like you can go an hour north to the Sunshine Coast or an hour south to the Gold Coast, and you've got unbelievable beaches. There's mountains, scenery, and again like a really developing like football culture out there as well. So I think Australia and New Zealand were really significant for me in my development.
I'm sure when you saw the Women's World Cup then there last year, just watching it, you're probably like, I know where they're at. I know what they're experiencing. I know that was anybody who went to the World Cup, the Women's World Cup last summer seemed to really enjoy both those countries. And it was like a great opportunity to really highlight a place that maybe some people would never go, or never think of going. When you are on this journey, tell me about your path in the sense that do you have family? Did you bring wife and kids along? Did you bring a significant up? I mean, how was this journey for you? Because when you're bouncing around, that's a lot to try to navigate. We talk to players and coaches and staff members when they are a professional athlete or work in professional sports. It's not just, there's usually a lot going on behind the scenes to try to make it work and make people feel comfortable.
Yeah, I think just to give some context, I was working at Charlton Athletic in England, and Charlton are kind of renowned for like having one of the top academies in terms of producing talent in the UK. So a smaller club, they're in League One at the moment, but like a really top academy. So I was working there for 2 years in a really good role. I was leading the academy goalkeeping department. I think I just turned 25 when I started there, so relatively like young in terms of that kind of position as well. And I think like I could have stayed there and could have had a long career in academy football. But I had like a desire to travel. And then when the opportunity in New Zealand come up, I thought it was kind of like one of those now or never moments. So in New Zealand and Australia, I was kind of traveling alone. I think the roles that I went to, I always had some sort of connection to in terms of knowing somebody there, whether it was like a technical director, sporting director, academy director. So there was always some sort of connection, but no connection like initially to any of the places that I went to, just like a real love of football and a desire to travel. And I ended up meeting my wife in Brisbane. And we've been together since Brisbane, and from Brisbane moved to Melbourne. From Melbourne we moved back to the UK, and then obviously out here to the States recently.
So how is she enjoying the journey? And is she from Australia? Is that where she's from? Is that her home base?
Yeah, that's right. So she's from Australia. So we were living in Brisbane together, and then I had the opportunity to go to Melbourne, and she's originally from Melbourne, so everything kind of aligned in that sense. We could live near her family and that type of thing. And then like post COVID, we had a kind of decision to make, and my visa was running out. And we could have stayed a little bit longer in Australia, but we felt like England was a new challenge, new environment, and she's been like really supportive and really willing to be part of the journey and kind of continue her own career like as we're traveling and moving around as well.
And then back to England, as you just mentioned, and Barnsley is your most recent stop before coming here to Minnesota United and Major League Soccer. Can you talk to us a little bit about your connection with Khaled and sort of how that came about? Because I believe he brought you to Barnsley as well, and then over here to Minnesota United, if I have that correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. So I didn't know Khaled previous to Barnsley, and it was an interesting one as well. I'd just finished with Melbourne Victory in Australia. We had decided to move back, and I had some meetings with like various clubs, and there was one point I nearly went to Denmark to work in the Superliga there, and then had a couple of like quite interesting meetings in England. And then this opportunity at Barnsley come up. I was recommended, I believe, by somebody to Khaled, and we had just kind of started a conversation, and there was an opportunity for me to go there for a week. It was almost like a trial period, really, where their goalkeeping coach was away on international duty at the time. They knew he was due to leave in a month as well. So there was like an opportunity there and an opening. I kind of made myself available. I worked with the first team goalkeepers for a week there. And then prior to that, I had some like really positive meetings with Khaled. And he offered me the role there, and I stayed there for 3 years.
Just because the Loons are away doesn't mean you have to watch the match from home. With Loons Watch Spots, presented by Coors Light, you can find a piece of that Allianz Field atmosphere at some of your favorite Twin Cities locations. Check out the full list of locations and upcoming watch parties at MNUFC.com/Loons Watch Spots. And then now here you are in Major League Soccer with Minnesota United. What intrigued you about this opportunity and Major League Soccer in particular? And then also after that, I want to dive more into what your role looks like. What is it exactly that you do? Because we all see the goalkeeping coach that's on the pitch, warming up the goalkeepers, working with them, in training every day and whatnot. But your role, at least in my view, seems a little bit different than that as you oversee everything. And I saw you at training the other day, clearly, working on a lot of the set piece point of emphasis for this club. But first and foremost, what intrigued you about Major League Soccer and about Minnesota United in particular?
Yeah, I think a combination of a lot of different things aligned. Obviously, I was always intrigued by the US. MLS is now becoming a top league with a lot of talent, a lot of good players, and a real mix of nationalities and cultures. So the intrigue to work in the MLS, a different league, different challenge, different country, the connection to Khaled, and knowing the type of club and departments that he runs, and knowing that we work well together, and he supports me in running the department, but also gives me time and space to be able to contribute and like provide my own ideas and philosophy. the opportunity to work with Eric Ramsey, like a really top young aspiring coach with great potential. So I think the ability to come here and work and learn off him, but support him at the same time. And then a football club as well that's really like developing on a real kind of transitional period. But I think again with a lot of potential and a lot of future success to come. So that was really kind of the intrigue of all those elements combined. And then in regards to my role, so first and foremost, I'm a head of goalkeeping. My priority is that the first team goalkeepers are performing on the pitch. So from a first perspective, and then running the department as like a holistic individual kind of like department that collaborates and integrates with the rest of the club. So the goalkeeper supporting the team, integrated within the team, and then developing the goalkeeper like psychologically, preparing for games, physically, speaking with sports science and ensuring that they've got the best kind of physical model, ensuring that they're fresh and ready to prepare from a recruitment standpoint and perspective, and kind of setting the model of what we expect, how the goalkeeper plays in the team, incorporating all the goalkeeping staff, and then how we interact with all the other departments. So it's kind of a little bit multifaceted. There's a lot of things from a goalkeeping perspective. So anything goalkeeper within the club, like it's my responsibility to lead and ensure that we have everything kind of world leading and top standard. And then contributing to the set plays, and at the moment the defensive set plays at the club. So just ensuring that we have good structure, that we're hard to beat, and making sure that players know their roles and responsibilities, and that we're fully prepared going into games.
So in training sessions, are you the one mapping out what a training session looks like for the goalkeeping core at every single level? Is that a meeting that you guys get together with the different academy teams and academy goalkeepers, and then also the twos and whatnot? Or how does that look? What does that look like? Because we know that, with the first team and the field players, there's communication and conversations about what a training session looks like. How does your role fit into that from a goalkeeping standpoint?
Yeah, so I think like alignment is key. So alignment from the first team through to the second team in the academy. So we had a really positive meeting with all the goalkeeping staff at the club the other day, speaking around how to prepare for the game, opposition preview, how we review post game, all those types of elements, and how the training session is structured, all the different individual elements, and how the training session flows from start to finish, and ensuring that we're aligned in terms of how we work. So we want to work from like a game related approach. So we like training to look like and feel like the game, to create the pressure for the goalkeepers that they'll face. Obviously, you can never recreate playing in front of 20,000 and not being able to hear anything and interact with players, but we try and create a pressurized environment so they've got realistic like stimulus to the game. And I think that's really key, that's kind of aligned through academy through to the first team. So Cristiano Costa, really supportive. It's been fantastic since I've come into the club in terms of educating me about the goalkeepers, what to expect. Really good in terms of his relationships with the individual goalkeepers as well. So we've worked really closely together, and he's kind of allowed me to kind of hit the ground running in terms of running the goalkeeper department, knowing and understanding the goalkeepers, the staff, interaction with the different academy teams and staff as well. And Jonathan Barber's been working like really specifically with the second team, and ensuring that the goalkeepers are ready to step up, because they're replicating a similar kind of training process, and ensuring that there's like really good like aligned communication throughout as well.
So I noticed when I was at training the other day, I was going to say Friday, but I know it wasn't Friday because we're all cattywampus on what day it is. It's Wednesday, and normally match day -1 is a Friday, but that you were doing a ton of set piece work with the group defensively, especially because that's been a point of emphasis as the team has struggled a little bit as of recently, maybe not on the first ball, but the second ball kind of thing that Eric Ramsey has talked about. But you did it in a small-sided game where there was like a run of play and then maybe a pause for a set piece, or a set piece that just occurred naturally, or a corner kick, or something of that nature. Is that what you're talking about when you're saying we're trying to replicate sort of the intensity of the moment? You can't replicate 20,000 people, but just the flow of the game, instead of just like, hey, we're going to set up shop on this one end and just knock three corners in, and then we're going to take one set piece from over here, one set, but everybody's standing still and there's no real flow to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one thing we've spoken about as staff, and something that's been happening prior to me arriving as well. I think it's like a set piece is a really like complex moment in the game with a lot of variables, and like the only moment where the ball is still and players have freedom of movement. So it's a complex scenario that's hard to manage. And I like to be the kind of the protagonist as much as possible in those situations, even though you can never control what the opposition are doing, but you can be prepared in most scenarios to kind of have an expectation of what they're going to bring, and to be really adaptable and flexible in the moments. And I think those like game related scenarios really help those situations, because now you're bringing the complexities, the variables, the first, second, third phase, and then also the opportunity to counter attack if you dealt with the situation properly. So I think they're kind of, there's a lot of different angles and aspects that we work at, but trying to ensure that we're really organised, that we're the first to react, that every player knows their role responsibility, everybody knows their structure, because substitutes happen. We can have 5 subs in the game, injuries happen, red cards happen. So we need to make sure we have plan A and plan B. And first and foremost, really organised. But then the players as well have shown like a real willingness in terms of competing for first and second balls and being able to put their bodies on the line to kind of defend those situations, which can be really tough.
Hopefully it doesn't get to a point where you have to start working and training on defending all set pieces with 10 men. Like that doesn't become a thing where you have to just consistently work on defending with 10. You're probably looking forward to a game where you could like, implement the set piece defending or even attacking set pieces, which we haven't even talked about. And I know I'm focusing on that, and that's not clearly what you do the most of, but it was such a focal point last night in that game. And then also just knowing that this club is trying to focus on that, as that's where a lot of the goals have been given up as of late. When you look at your coming into this point in this season, how difficult was that to come in when the season is already nearly halfway gone? You're going right into Leagues Cup before you really jump back into the regular season. And this has been a season of first for this whole club because Khaled came in late, Eric Ramsey came in late. It's kind of been this evolving thing. How challenging was that for you to come in that moment?
Yeah, I think it's never easy to come into a new environment and a new football club in kind of any stage of the season or pre-season or off-season. And I think to come in at a point in the season, where like the playing model's been established, the staff have been working well together. There was a number of players on international duty and out injured, so it was like a really kind of strange time to come in. But I think a good moment for me to come in with fresh eyes, a good moment to come in, and Dane was a way to get to know Clint and Alec and the rest of the goalkeeping group. And then for the players to start filtering back and to start building relationships, and then obviously having to communicate to players that are not always like fluently English speaking and those type of scenarios. I think it's a real challenge, but like an exciting one as well. And I think that was part of my kind of intrigue to come to this league and come to the country and work in a really diverse kind of multicultural changing room as well. So really difficult, but really interesting as well, and kind of relishing the challenge as much as possible.
When you look at this goalkeeping core, and you just mentioned Clint and Alec, and people are very familiar here with Fred Emmings because he's a St. Paul native and a homegrown, one of the first homegrowns signed for Minnesota United. And then, of course, Dane St. Clair coming back from the international duty with Canada. What do you make of this group? And then also, I want to get your take because we talk about field players and having certain profiles for certain positions, and maybe different wingers that work differently and present different things and different challenges offensively and defensively. Is goalkeeping in the same vein, or is it pretty much, what are your sort of standards when you're looking at a profile for a goalkeeper, and then how this core sort of stacks up with that?
Yeah, I think first of all, the goalkeeping group is like quite a balanced group in terms of a mixture of ages, experience levels, different backgrounds, different numbers of games, and they all contribute in their own way. I think they work well together and support each other really well as well. And I think it's really important that the goalkeeper that isn't playing or isn't starting, because we can only play in start one, they've been really supportive, say towards Dane or towards Alec or Clint, whoever was playing at the moment. So I think in terms of the group dynamic, I think it's been top. In terms of a goalkeeping profile, I think when you look at the department as a whole, I like to have difference within the goalkeeping group. I think there's no point having three goalkeepers that are as close to identical as possible. So I like them to have different attributes and different skill sets. However, I think it's the principles of the position that need consistency. So I think, as you've seen last night, the most important role of the goalkeeper is to keep the ball out of the net and protect the goal. So that for me will never change and will always be priority. And then we're speaking with the goalkeepers in terms of their contribution to how they command the area. Dane is very good in terms of sweeping and defending the space and really kind of willing to put himself in like good starting positions and deal with the ball outside the box as well. And then it's about being really impactful when they have the ball. So we don't want a goalkeeper to look like a number six, like central midfielder dictating the game. But I think to have the real mix of distribution, to be able to see the pass into the last line and have the ability to play beyond the back line, but also be calm enough to deal with back passes, deal with pressure, to have a mix of short and long range passing. So that's kind of what we look for, probably in the order that I've just kind of prioritized there.
When you look at this group again, and you hit on such an important point, which I don't think people maybe fully appreciate or think about, is the fact that the goalkeeping core has to support each other because you have this competition aspect clearly pushing each other. But the fact that you only can start one, it's so different than a field player. Because when you're a field player, you know that at some moment you're likely going to get into the match, even if you're not in that starting role. How important is that to just find the right chemistry and the right mix of that group where you're pushing and supporting each other and driving each other to be your best, but you're understanding and not there isn't a unhealthy tension in the group.
Yeah, I think it's a really challenging balance to find. And I don't think there's ever a perfect balance or perfect scenario because you're always going to be upsetting at least one person every week. I think what the group have kind of focused on here and what they've done over the kind of recent years and recent seasons is like they've been really challenging, competitive, but finding the right way to support each other when they play as well. And I found just like generally across the change room, I've seen that with the outfield players, with the goalkeepers, with the staff, is there's a real kind of supportive nature. And like staff are really communicative in terms of expressing the message, and those conversations are not always easy. And it's not nice to disappoint someone as well. Like obviously when somebody works so hard during the week and they throw their body on the line and they're challenging and competing and doing their best for themselves and their team, and don't always get the opportunity to then express that for 90 minutes at the weekend. I think it can be so tough. But I think having like the empathy to understand what it feels like to be in that position, and also to try and help support them as best you can and ensure that one, they're ready to play, two, they're continuing to develop, and three, they're supporting whoever it is playing.
What's your favorite part about coaching? Because you just sort of hit on the psychology aspect of it, but you've also talked about the leading, the communication, just the intricacies of the position. What's your favorite part about coaching?
Yeah, interesting one. I think like my approach to coaching is like person first, then the goalkeeper, then their application into the game. So I kind of use that process. Like it's difficult. I really like kind of building the relationship with the goalkeepers over time and getting to know them over as people, and their character and what drives them. But I also just really love the game and love the position and love designing and replicating training. So I would say probably those two things. I think the relationship with the goalkeeper and then the kind of design of training and trying to prepare them for the game at the weekend or whatever it may be.
And then I want to just ask you one more question about the actual game last night. Can you take people inside that locker room after the game? Because I feel like Dane St. Clair was man of the match and he clearly had a big night. But in general, for the defensive side of this team and starting from the top to the back, not just the back line, what was that feeling like to be able to keep that clean sheet, to hold on to a win at home? You're down a man, knowing that that is a point that has been you've been on the struggle bus a little bit with it. So what was that like when that moment when everyone kind of went into the locker room? Can you give us a little peek behind the curtain?
Yeah, I think whenever you face adversity, and come out winning, I think is always a good thing. I think it builds confidence and character and like the collective nature within the group. I think it's probably we might look back at this moment to a level that brought like real cohesion. So I think there was like initially there was a real kind of group mentality and collective effort and energy, acknowledging the fact that we come back from some adversity and had a positive outcome. And then there was some like individual acknowledgement of Dane's performance from the boss as well. So that was nice from his perspective. But then I could see how humble Dane was in that moment as well, and was applauding his teammates and their support. So it was a really nice moment after the game to win the game, to come back from adversity, for a collective effort and energy. So I think all those things combined made for like a really good night.
Yeah, and then you've got a player like Tapias who isn't like, at least outwardly doesn't seem like the most vocal guy. And he was like the lone piece in the center of that back line that is like pretty much been there every single game with all the moving pieces that have been around it. And it sort of felt like he was throwing his body on the line. You know, people are pointing. You guys are flashing up fingers and numbers on corner kicks and set pieces about what to do, back to the point of 20,000 people screaming and yelling. So it felt like a very energized night from not just the stadium and the fans, but from the team as well. What has been your impression? I don't know. How many road trips, how many games have you been at? I don't even know, because you just came into the mix. So did you go to Seattle?
Yeah. So I've already
Okay.
been to LA and Houston, Seattle. Yeah.
Okay. So now those are all very different atmospheres. LA is very different than Houston, which is very different than Seattle. But Allianz Field, what's your impression of the stadium? And it wasn't even, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on this podcast, but I don't know that it was 100% full last night, because it's also a little different when it's Leagues Cup as opposed to Major League Soccer and regular season. But what's your impression so far?
The stadium and the environment is incredible. My first game, I arrived on the 2nd of July, and then I came to watch the Vancouver game. And then I started the next training session. So that was kind of my introduction, and it was really good for me. I'd obviously watch the games on TV and that type of thing. And it was amazing just to see the game live at the stadium, the atmosphere, and then what it might feel like for the players on the pitch. And then I think to be at ground level in the Allianz is incredible. I think even maybe when the stadium wasn't full last night, the atmosphere was still amazing. And I think the support that the supporters and the crowd gave to the team really drove them as well. And it was a real like kind of collective effort, and like you said, players throwing their body on the line, heading balls, having to like defend consecutive set pieces, first phase, second phase, first phase, like the number of crosses in the box, the saves that they made. So I think all of those things combined were amazing in that incredible stadium and atmosphere as well.
And then I just want to know, like, you know, how are you and your wife settling in? I know I'm sure it's been kind of fast and furious. You're thrown right into the mix, but how have you liked the Twin Cities? What have you been able to experience? What sort of recommendations have you been given? You know, are you finding a place to live? Angie's probably sorting all that out. I know Angie does pretty much everything for everybody, but how's your arrival been in your sort of acclimation?
Yeah, I think obviously when you move, like we've moved a lot of times. When you're moving overseas, you know what to expect in terms of the process, but you never know what to expect in terms of the place you're moving to. So my wife and I moved with our two dogs. So a huge move like across the world, which was like it's never an easy process, but the club have been like unbelievably supportive, provided it like everything for us to really go straight into work in the season. So I was straight in. My wife was really supportive, trying to organize a place to live, a car, and like all those different things that you need just to survive kind of day to day. So yeah, it was a really interesting process, but I think like as a place, I think we've probably come at the right time in terms of the weather and the climate. Really enjoyed the city, and I think again, like similar to Australia, like a really nice balance of having a city feel, but being able to go out into nature very quickly, which I think is a good combination that we're kind of used to and what we really like.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's been a whirlwind. Until you guys find out what the next plan is in this League's Cup, maybe you can take a minute to take a breath and relax a moment and enjoy some of the food or a lake or something. in the Twin Cities area. So thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks, Kyndra. Really appreciate it.
All right, everybody, that is another episode of Sound of the Loons. We will check in again next week. Have a great week, everybody.